before we even move for an approval of the agenda, if you want me to run the meeting for the Harbor and the P&Z, I'm happy to do that. If you'd like, Member Baker also has plenty of experience being chair. If you'd like her to be the chair. But I think we need I'd like a head nod so that I know who you guys want to chair the meeting. Would you like me to I have the gavel, keep on going with it? I get a head nod. Okay. We'll do it that way. Well, with that, I have no amendments, changes, or additions to tonight's published agenda. Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agenda.
I have a motion from Baker, a chair from Montalto, a second from Montalto, not a chair, right? Any comments or questions from the members on the dais? Do you have any public comments or questions on the motion on the floor to approve the agenda as it was published? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. If you could all please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one public announcement, and that is Thursday, February 10th, 2022. The City Commission will hold a public workshop at the Overlay District in the Urban Service Area. I'm hopeful that this body can be in attendance at that meeting. That's where we decide how big we want to telegraph to developers we're willing to grow, or maybe we want to shrink it, expand it, change it up a little bit, but I think that would be a really good moment for the P&Z and the Commission and the HARB to talk to each other about visions. That I did not say, but I want to say 7 p.m., right? The Overlay District is going to establish the aesthetic design standards for the development along the city's two primary corridors, 26 and 45. And then, of course, the urban service area is where we are saying you can develop in. So both of those conversations, the aesthetic design, how we want the look and the feel coming in and out of town on our main corridors, and that USA, both of those are big time policy decisions that we need to think long and hard about. So if you can be there, we would certainly appreciate it.
So what's the date again?
February 10th, which is this Thursday. This Thursday, we believe we'll be here in the chambers, in City Hall, 7 p.m. So we are going to have big blown up maps, tables, people can draw, use Sharpies, move around, have conversations. We'll tape up, different ideas on the walls. We can all move around, talk about our shared concerns, thoughts, questions, those kinds of things. Any more questions? This Thursday, the 10th, 7 p.m. right here. We'll have the heat on. Okay. There are no other questions. Then we have one presentation tonight, Preserving Mid-Century Cultural Resources. Is that going to be you, Miss Jackson? Mid-century. It's my favorite part of the century. Wow. That hurt.
All right, good evening. So,
shoot, that was well along.
I'm going to give you guys an informative presentation on some different styles of architecture that are from the mid-century and some background and how it relates to the city of Newberry. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Elena Jackson. I'm one of the newest city planner here. And my background, I have a bachelor's in anthropology and a master's in historic preservation, both from the University of Florida. My thesis was a project of a GIS database where I mapped civil rights sites around the state of Florida. There were 200 inventoried in my database. I mostly have, of my background and the experience I have, most of it is with mid-century cultural resources. I worked on the Gainesville mid-20th century cultural resource survey, specifically phase 2, primarily with Suburban Heights, which has been in the news a lot recently. I also worked on the Northport St. Joe survey, which was a range from 1900 roughly to 1950s. And then I also was part of a team working on a National Register nomination for the University Lutheran Church Complex, which is on University Avenue right across from the university. And that is a 1961 structure. So just as a little bit of background with what's going on nationally, more and more resources from the mid-century are being considered historic now. So as a background, which I'm sure most of you are aware, buildings must be at least 50 years old to be on the National Register of Historic Places. Unless they can prove exceptional significance, they can be younger than that. Some local designations allow for structures that are 45 years old or older, and the dates that correspond to that would be a 1972 or 1977 structure and older. So many buildings built in this mid-century era, which I will define roughly, are now old enough to be historic. So currently we have one historic district within Newberry, and the period of significance associated with that district is 1894 to 1938, and that's for the National Register Historic District. Locally, we actually have more structures within that district that are contributing, and of those, 12 have a construction date corresponding to the mid-century, which in most cases is roughly defined as 1930, sometimes you see 1935 to 1975. But of those within our historic district, most of them are frame vernacular. They're from the earlier period of the mid-century, and they don't actually have an architectural style associated with mid-century architecture.
Try it again.
Okay, here I've outlined our current historic district, and all of the green dots, which is from the GIS, are showing the structures that are already contributing to our district, and I have circled in red those structures that have their mid-century by date, but not necessarily by architectural style. And then I have covered with stars here buildings that do have a mid-century ranch or mid-century modern style architecture.
Elena, how come the jails and the utility building aren't?
This is the city GIS.
So we haven't done the work to put them on the registration?
They're probably locally designated, and this probably corresponds with the National Register District. I'm not exactly sure, but this is what we have logged in our GIS.
I thought the only reason that the historic district extended there was to get those two buildings into it. So what would we need to do to get them on the national register?
They might already be. I'd have to go back and look at the nomination.
Looks like she has an idea too. That's when. Oh, so you're saying we've only identified what we've locally identified?
This is not my
This-
identification.
Okay.
This is from that older map that they did when they were actually doing the historic resources survey. So at that time, they mapped there's a lot of things have changed since then. So this is the original. So we really, looking at the newest in 2011 and anything new that we do since then, which we've applied for money, we are on the list to get the funding to update our historic resources survey. And at that time, we can bring everything up to date. But they are part of that historic district, yes, the jail and the electric plant.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Does that answer your questions? Okay. So as a background for historically, here I've identified mid-century as 45 to 75. There's just a broad range, and it depends also where you're talking about geographically. Us being a more rural area, it would take longer for trending architectural styles and construction methods to move their way out here. But historically, Florida was experiencing a lot of growth during this period after World War II. The University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research, BEBR, specifically Professor Osterbind, has proven that, or he has figured out that Florida's housing increased by 50% between 1940 and 1950. So just in that 10-year period, Florida doubled. There are many reasons behind this, but some of them have been linked to the location of many military bases within Florida. So after the war was over, many of those who had been stationed at bases in Florida during the war said, hey, I want to stay in Florida. It's a pretty nice place. So that is one contributing factor to the growth post-World War II. There was also the baby boom, and the GI Bill made it possible for those soldiers to get low-interest loans for homes, businesses, and farms. And the whole story, just the ranch houses in general and the growth really show a story of the increase in quality of life and the middle class nationally. There was also an emergence of standardization between like windows, sheetrock, just all the materials that go into construction. There was more standardization of those, as well as concrete slab foundations instead of the pier foundations. So now I'm going to outline and talk about some of the different architectural styles. This is minimal traditional. It is typically found already in our historic district and identified as historic. This is from the earlier portion of the mid-century. They have they're smaller structures, more simple in form, one story. They have different forms, but the one that most people recognize this house here, and it is a variation of the minimal traditional, just with a more revival style. Then there's ranch houses, which I'll have some more pictures from around Newberry in a minute. These start to emerge in the 1940s and continue really till this day, but the famous ranch houses of the mid-century kind of start changing in the 1970s. They have many stylistic variations, but there's some common character-defining features. You'll see multiple siding types on the same facade, maybe changing from brick to wood, block houses, stone, lots of veneers. They have shallower pitched roofs and flat roofs, as found in more of the mid-century modern style. They have decorative shutters that do not fit the entirety of the window. They're there for decoration. Broader chimneys, carports and garages, as opposed to earlier structures which were not geared towards cars everywhere. So there's some great examples around Newberry with some breeze blocks incorporated into their carports. There's also built-in planters. If the windows are still original, they're typically aluminum, and they're either awning or jalousie style windows. I think I've covered most of those. And then there's some other mid-century architectural styles that are less common, if at all present in Newberry. Obviously, we need to survey further, which I'll get into, but there's the split level, and the split level is a form rather than an architectural style, so there are many different, you'll see many styles of a split level. And then there's contemporary, which I did find one, and those typically have exposed beams, recessed entries, wider eaves, greater expanses of a single facade type, and then more asymmetry. So here's some examples from around Newberry. This one you can see clearly the low-pitched roof, the change in siding. We go from concrete block to brick and then back to concrete block, the shutters. Here's another great example. And the picture's pretty dark, but within the carport there are breeze blocks there. And again, the siding type, up in the gable ends, it becomes wood siding rather than just concrete block. Oh, and they have the original windows. These ones I included because they have decorative roof supports at the porches. They're that metal with the scroll work. It's not. No. And I also liked the one on the left because it's the only example of the pictures I included with a hipped roof, but it's still a very shallowly pitched hipped roof rather than a gable roof. And then this one is towards the later end of the mid-century when we start seeing more stylized ranches, which is part of what I worked on with the city of Gainesville, was creating a typology of ranches. So you see neoclassical, colonial revival, and Spanish revival, which is what this is an example of. Around Newberry, here's two of the other less common, but the Annex building is a vernacular version of a modern style building. It has the flat roof and the incorporated slants. And then on the right is a ranch style house, but it's a contemporary style ranch. So it has those exposed beams, it has planters along the entire front of the house that are built in, and the recessed entry. Might be a little difficult to see on this size screen, but here I've taken two historic aerials, one from 1949 and one from 1961. And there are later historic aerials that show even more of the development, but I thought this one had a very clear picture on 1961 of all those white dots that I've pointed out with red arrows are development that exists in 1961 that was not in existence in 1949. And the green rectangle is to help align yourself. That's the NHS football field. So as you can see, very close to the high school to the east, there is a large development there, and then up along 2741 to the east as well. And there are other neighborhoods that you see more in the 1968 aerial or the 1971 aerial, but this one just had a very clear photo from that time. So some considerations to take away from this presentation. The public isn't generally very educated about post-war cultural resources and their significance or what they are or what they look like. I see a lot of people thinking that shutters aren't original to a house. They are original too, and as well as damaging their brick by painting it incorrectly. But I won't get into that today. So as Wendy mentioned, we have applied for funding, and it's looking good for us at the moment. I don't want to jinx that, but we are expected to receive funding for our Historic Resources Survey project, but it is necessary to inventory what is in Newberry and what condition it's in. And then there's a potential for another local historic district, or the possibility of expanding our own local historic district, or just leaving here knowing a little bit more about what's in Newberry. And yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Does the board have any questions?
Yes, I do. These construction,
Here we go. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. These structures that you've identified, and you may have said this, and I might have missed it, but are any of them within the bounds of the current?
Yes.
Okay, they are within the bounds.
Yes.
So are some of them outside the boundaries?
Yes.
Okay, as well.
So that's what I should have gone over this screen grab here of the parcels. I've kind of circled some areas that, based on looking at the historic aerial photographs, might be areas where there's a high concentration of likelihood. And most of them are adjacent to our current historic district, which is why I think there's a strong case for just expanding that district, but you would also need to expand the period of significance along with it. Most of the resources that are already contributing to our local historic district are from that very early mid-century period and don't include the ranches. It is interesting, though, that the annex building, which is a 1960 more vernacular modern style, is a contributing structure. So there's not really much consistency in terms of what is contributing and what not. And I haven't been here long enough, and I haven't
Right.
looked into it long enough to know why some structures are contributing and others not.
So the ones that are within the boundary of the district, I mean, could you like update the master site files, and actually bring them in as contributing structures? Those.
Yeah, so the Florida Master Site Files are just an inventory for the state and don't actually have any teeth for protection unless they do so at local level. And I know Gainesville has a demolition stop based upon if you have a Florida Master Site File or not. And hopefully that funding with that survey project would lead to things like that.
Okay, so I mean, there's a possible that could be a first step in this thing, is getting those structures within the boundaries, as contributing structures, and then move. Second phase would be to expand the district or
Yes.
create new districts. Okay.
And there's a possibility that more of the structures within the boundaries of our district are not contributing. I didn't actually look at those. I just prepared what is already labeled as contributing based upon the table that I have.
Okay. Thank you.
I have, I don't know, a question, a statement. I myself and a couple other people have been very active with the Little Red Schoolhouse. And one of the rooms in the Little Red Schoolhouse, we have the schoolroom itself, eventually, I assume.
It's coming.
It's coming, right? But one of the rooms, the conference room, is what it's used for. We have a lot of pictures that we had collected. Don Davis worked on that project long ago, mid-century. But the one thing that we have not been able to get any pictures of the older, the 1900s to whatever, the community in town where there were homes and buildings and that I've begged and pleaded and talked to people. If you come across anything like that, the old school, the old Bessie's boarding house, I can list many of them. But we would love to put those in with the other pictures. We have the Barry's drugstore, that kind of stuff, which was all right here downtown, so that was pretty simple. But we don't have a mix from both communities.
Yeah.
So as you're looking and searching, if you happen across some.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be on the lookout.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Is staff making any suggestions right now? What is the benefit of expanding the district? Do we get grant opportunities? Do we get, what do?
I'd have to look into that for you at the time.
Okay.
I'm not so sure of any specific grant opportunities for mid-century, but as with this, since we are a CLG, that does open some lines of funding for us.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Okay, next item is consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as it was published?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Member Baker, second from Member Long. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That's going to move us to our first public hearing and ordinance. Item 4 is an amendment to the land development regulations to allow electronic message signage at City Hall. Scott, do you have anything to read into the record to put this? Thank you. Take your time. We're getting everybody situated.
Mr. Mayor, the title would be an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations as amended by amending Section 2.1 definitions, general, and Section 4.2.20 signs to provide for changeable copy/electronic message signs at city-owned facilities, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion would be to pass the ordinance as read by title only and provide your advisory opinion to the commission.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Wendy.
Okay,
Technical difficulties. Yeah.
1 second.
okay. Well, as was just read into the record about the title of this ordinance, notice that the title mentioned electronic signs for city facilities, but when you go through your packet, it talks about specifically City Hall. The purpose for doing that, to advertise it more broadly, was in case you were going to do anything in addition to City Hall, to have that flexibility. But what we presented to you is an ordinance that says specifically to be able to allow electronic message signs for City Hall, because that's located in your historic district, and that's why that one is before you as a Historic Architectural Review Board. So in this case, we've got a proposed amendment to change our code to allow for that, and specifically doing City Hall, and that will provide a public service. It will help to increase our communication with the public. It reaches those people who are not always on the internet and who may be driving by and not is in tune with that kind of stuff, but want to know what's going on, to be able to know whatever the latest activities and events that are coming up, and also for emergency and safety kinds of messages as well. And essentially, already in your code, signs are allowed on public property when the public entity, as in our city government, places signs on the property because they're trying to either meet a public purpose or to identify the public property, like when you see a sign that says City Hall or municipal building and that kind of thing, or to convey public information, which is right up the alley of what we're proposing to do with the electronic message sign. In this case, the requested amendment would be consistent with the practice of local governments being exempt from regulations a lot of times for their municipal-owned property. So it's not inconsistent with what goes on in many other cases for all kinds of types of uses. In this case, it supports the city's ability to fulfill the public purpose, which is promoting the public health, welfare, safety, welfare.
Sorry.
Wait a minute. What's happening? Stop. I can't speed up the talk that much. But it does help with that public purpose for the safety, morals, order, the public good. And essentially here, we've got the actual underlined strike-through, but there's no strike-through, it's just underlined. But notice, I do want to point out, the section on the design standards is actually 4.2.20.4, which has been corrected in the actual ordinance, and that's a typo there. But this is for municipal-owned city hall facility, and so I've added that. We're recommending you put that in there as part of your table so that you're showing that it's for the city hall, city-owned building facility, and that it's for that property only. And then it's in the historic district, that's what the H is, and then it's limited by area according to your code already, which is 100 square feet is what we're proposing here with 50 maximum for each side. And then that you can have, this is the other part, the electronic message signs, the 70% is the same as any other place in your code that allows for those electronic message signs. So to be consistent, so that the city isn't asking for anything more than what someone else might do. And this is just strictly to be able to provide that public information. And of course, the historic district regulations state that the sign can't be higher than 5 feet, so it would comply with that. In your code, it talks about signs within the historic districts, and we're adding a little bit of language in there just to say that that signs that are erected or displayed within historic districts, unless specified otherwise within these regulations, that they would maintain the character of the district or structure by the following, and essentially that the sign shall be a size and shape, all the things that we already require in our district, that it has to go along with this type of building. It has to match that building, match the period, looking at the sign graphics, at the lettering styles, the types of signage that would be characteristic of that period. You're still looking at that kind of matching up kind of thing, but unless otherwise specified, meaning that in this case, we're saying, again, for the architectural site and design standards that we already have in our code. So you notice, like under 4.2.36, we have architectural site and design standards that apply to our new commercial, or when you're altering significantly commercial and new residential types of uses in the city. It goes through, there's a lot of different requirements for those kinds of standards, and when it applies to signs, it talks about how it's supposed to match that overall design of the exterior of the building, the size, the actual Florida vernacular type of style, and that the monolithic sign supports that kind of thing. So it's a size and scale have to match. So we're saying that you still have those same requirements, in that it can be something it matches the building. And the sign can have that gingerbread trim depending on what's appropriate for that type of use as you go through that list. And then the other lighting of the signs would be the incandescent, that kind of thing that's already required in your code, but we have to add the language except as provided otherwise in these regulations, so that you can do that electronic message sign for that one location for the city hall for that public purpose. It does require the landscaping around the base of the sign, and that kind of thing would still be in there. So I don't know, I'm rushing through that, so if you have other questions, we can certainly go through those. I do have some pictures, but they're not in this presentation, so they don't help us at all. They're in another presentation at the back of the office. So we're recommending that you would consider this ordinance as you read through and looked at as we're talking about tonight, and make a recommendation to the City Commission as far as from the Historic Architectural Review Board perspective, what you think you would recommend that they do.
Board members.
Okay, let me try this again. Wendy, I have some questions about, in the particular, one of those requirements that you have in that list, the gingerbread
Yeah.
one there. it says encouraged.
Right.
Now, every sign that is in the historic district, does that come before this board? I haven't been on the board long enough to, for us to review any kind of signage, but is it signage place, does this board review from an architectural standpoint and contributing, whether it's a contributing architectural form or not, does this board review signs that are placed in?
The way if it's a totally new development and something is part of that development and it comes through, it would come through here as a certificate of appropriateness review. However, the Historic Architectural Review Board, along with the Planning and Zoning and the City Commission, approved a change to your code which provides that signs are approved administratively through the staff.
Okay.
And the criteria being that it does have to comply with these requirements.
Okay, so the staff reviews it to
Still-
see, so this board doesn't really see.
Not the way it is now, unless they didn't like the answer, and then they would
Right.
bring it to you as a, way to challenge that. But that's how it is set up at this time,
Okay.
based on your direction.
Okay, so like the sign for City Hall here, and I was talking to Brian about this earlier today, but the surround for the sign or the base or whatever would replicate the materials on the building here or some design elements of this building. So that would be how it would be anchored, into front of the building. So that the sign itself, the housing would blend in with the architectural style of the building. But
Correct.
So I mean, when I see that though, when I see it says encouraged, it makes me wonder is that an enforceable part? Could the city or someone else, not anyone here, but sometime in the future, could they put something that really didn't look like different materials and things like that other than what's this building is constructed about? I just was wondering if it had any teeth in it, if that something like that needed to be changed instead of encouraged. I mean that some kind of language be put in that they have to replicate those materials, with the sign enclosure.
And that's certainly something that you can recommend under the current code, being that this is what's been advertised for the electronic signboard message.
Right,
So it's
okay.
just that. But there are definitely things throughout the code that could be looked at to be strengthened if that were the desire of the community, of the board and ultimately the city
Right.
commission to adopt those changes. Now, keep in mind that if something came through and was requested sign, and staff reviews it according to the standards that we have in here, if it didn't match, staff is not going to recommend it and not approve it because it's
Right.
under their jurisdiction for the administrative approval. Then they would challenge that. If they said, okay, well, I don't agree with that, I want to, what's the word when you're, appeal. So when
Okay.
you're appealing, you come back to the Historic Architecture Review Board.
Okay.
And they would come in and
So they
you
can-
would
they
decide.
can- okay.
They can still ask you, but from staff's perspective, we're going by encouraged means, in this kind of case for historic district, that's to keep in line with the Secretary of Interior standards and, all that would be very hard to not approve something that did not match that building.
Okay, all right, thanks, Wendy.
Yes. This is really for Mayor Marlowe, I think, Wendy, instead of you. But it seems to me that we discussed signage a while back, maybe a year ago. And I know I was concerned about that medical office and that sign down there, and I guess we still are not able to remove it or do anything about it. But my question is, have we come to terms with any of that yet?
No.
Okay, thank you. We need to.
We have, I'm being flippant, I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm going to irritate staff. We have a signed ordinance. I think there is some percentage of the businesses on our main street that are not in compliance with that signed ordinance. We periodically, about once every 12 to 18 months, talk about bringing that signed ordinance back. And we have not actually ever gotten to bringing that signed ordinance back because every time we try to open up that can of worms, it becomes a can of worms. The incident that Ms. Linda is referring to was one exception. I think we ended up with a special exception to allow that sign to go up high. At first, this board said it had to be down low. That caused some extra problems with the surrounding businesses, and then we ended up allowing that one to go up higher. So we do have a signed ordinance. The enforceability of that ordinance so far has been once the existing business leaves, when the next person comes in, we approach you at that point and say, the sign that the other business had is out of compliance, we need you to come into compliance. But for the businesses that have been here for a long time, they've kind of got out of, they've been sort of not grandfathered in, but we've just let sleeping dogs lie. So I'll try not to be flippant in a P&Z meeting.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd point out that that particular sign is in compliance. There are some on the corridor that are not, that we have put a hold on until we get in front of the commission and get new regulations. But that particular sign does comply. There was nothing that we could do to compel them to change their sign.
You're talking about the medical center? Because we voted to let the medical center go up that high and in that
Neon was
position.
the complaint that we initially got, and the lettering, and the answer was there was nothing about it that did not comply with our sign ordinance. We did issue the special exception
For the height.
Right.
But they did have to comply with reducing how bright it was, and then how much it changed, how quickly it changed, so that it could comply with the code. And keep in mind also, you have non-conforming signs in your district that until they change, or go out of business for 12 or more months, or they actually make some substantial change to the building, then it triggers something where you can change those kinds of things. But putting more teeth in your ordinance is something that's, like the mayor said, is something that you could look at in the future, but it's been met with some difficulty in the past.
Thanks for that background. Ms. Lynn?
Just one more, I'm sorry. So basically, until that building is leased or rented or sold, and only if the people who buy it or lease it are willing to work with the staff about that sign, that sign is just there forever, basically. There's nothing that we can do about it. I don't care if the signs, I mean, I do care, but.
That sign is not in the
I'm just trying to
historic
find out, do we
district.
have is there any future hope?
I can't, I
With
think
that
we'd have to
particular
ask.
sign.
Yeah, we'd have to ask staff to go back and research, because we gave them the permission to go up, and I don't know if we gave that business the permission, or if any new business that comes there has that permission in perpetuity. Do you know off the top of your head, Brian?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely correct. The sign itself, as far as the size of the facing and the electronic, that was all within compliance. The problem was that where the sign was located, it was obscured by the vehicles parking on either side of it from the traffic going by, and so they came in and asked for a variance to allow them to go up to a certain height so that it would be visible beyond the cars, and a little bit more visible to the traffic on State Route 45. The way our ordinance is written, it's a variance granted for a non-conforming sign, and so non-conforming structures, if they are left non-conforming and unused for, I believe it's 12 months or more, then when the next business comes in, we can request that they bring it back into compliance, or if they are going to replace more than 50% of the sign or the structure, then at that time we can require that they come back into compliance. An example of that would be the Dollar General store. They were replacing their sign, and before they got their sign permit from the building department, they went back and redesigned it so that it complied with the sign ordinance. And instead of being up on a pole like it had been before, they brought it down to the 8-foot limitation.
And again, that sign that we're having this conversation about is not in the historic district, so it's a little bit different conversation, but good background information. Are there any other questions?
One last as a statement, thank you to the city. Mr. New, I'm sure, had a lot to do with this. Our signage for outside the building here, I think that's a real plus for the whole community. That's going to be very helpful in many ways. So glad we're getting that.
Okay, that sounded awfully close to a motion to me. Any other questions?
We've been talking about this for years.
We have.
Need some kind of sign out in front of this building to share information with the community.
In our never-ending quest to be transparent, right? We drop flyers from planes just to try to spread the information. Okay, if there are no questions, do I hear a motion? Recommended motion is on the screen. Consider proposed
Where is
ordinance
it?
2022-19/LDR 2202 to make recommendation to the city commission in favor.
I make a motion, we approve.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Linda.
Second.
Okay, I have a second from Member Montalto. Any more questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That moves us on to agenda item number 5. I think our next meeting falls on the 4th of July. No, not our next, but we're going and jumping ahead in the calendar. We're really on the ball, planning ahead. So is staff suggesting that we move it from the 4th of July to the 5th? I'm a little confused by the word. Change July meeting date due to Monday, July 4th. Not. It's from.
No,
Away.
change July meeting date due to Monday, July 4th being the observed 4th of July holiday.
Huh. Okay, so do you have a suggested date, or do you want us to kick it around?
Mr. Chair, the suggested date would be, as we normally do, is go to the Tuesday directly after the holiday. But staff was more concerned with making sure that we establish a date when the board feels that they'll be able to provide a quorum. So we'd be happy to entertain a different date as long as we have a quorum, because if people are traveling for the holiday,
Do
not
you want
coming
to
back.
table this item until we have the other 2 members here then? So will you put this on, I guess we should hear from the HAR members, because first, are you guys good with July 5th? Would you guys be able to be here?
In fact, the 5th is the only day that month I will be able to be here.
Ah, okay, well then, what, takes the 5th off?
I vote for the 5th.
Wait, I'm sorry, you vote for the 5th? For the 5th, okay. And Ms. Peggy, you be
I
here?
think I'm off the board by then.
Are you off the board by then? Okay, all right. So we've heard their conversation. We'll table this until the next meeting. Do we need a motion to table? Let's have a motion table just to,
I move to table this item till the next meeting.
can I have a motion from Member Baker? Second from Member Long. All those in favor, I'm sorry, any questions on the motion from the dais? Public questions on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. We'll bring that back at the next meeting. That takes us to topics for members for discussion. Ms. Peggy, you got anything you want to discuss to the board?
I do not.
Okay. Mr. Montalto?
I do not.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Long? Okay. Member Baker?
None?
Ms. Lynn? None? I have none as well, so we will adjourn. Thank you guys for being here today. 3 minutes, we'll go into the P and Z. Anybody need a? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and call this regular scheduled February 7th Planning and Zoning Board meeting to order. As you've no doubt noticed, if you're watching us from home, we're short our chair and our vice chair during the HARB meeting. The remaining board members have asked me to chair. Is that request still good for the P&Z meeting? And I have a head nod.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. Then I have no additions, amendments, or changes to the published agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as it was published?
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion from Ms. Linda, a second from Ms. Baker. Any questions on the motion on the floor from the board? Any public questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have no announcements. Do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
I have a motion from Ms. Baker,
Second.
second from Ms. Linda. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Our first public hearing ordinance is a quasi-judicial. This board is going to cease being a legislative body when we enter quasi-judicial. We'll begin being a judicial body. That means we have to follow certain rules and procedures, and I'm going to outline those in a minute. We're going to start by asking our attorney to read the resolution into the record for us. This is Resolution 2022-04/SE22-03. Mr. Walker, if you'd read that for us, please.
Mr. Mayor, there's a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, serving as Board of Adjustment of the City of Newberry, considering an application for the special exception of an agricultural A zoning district as authorized under Section 4.4.5 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations to allow the operation of a rural event center facility on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, repealing resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is to pass the resolution as read by title only.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Again, when we're in quasi-judicial, we have to follow certain rules, and the primary rule is that the substantial and competent evidence must be met when the board makes a decision, and it shall state the following, and I quote, "All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence, and the giving opinion testimony is limited to experts. Closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record." Before we move on, I'm going to ask anybody that's here to speak to this agenda item, if you would please stand. We'll swear you in at this point. So if you think you might speak, even if you're not sure, if you would go ahead and stand, we'll have Ms. Janine. Would you please go ahead and swear everyone in?
Raise your right hand and you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do, Brian Thomas.
You have been duly sworn. All right, let's go ahead and do ex parte. Does any board member have any conversations with the applicant that you need to disclose at this point? Board Member Long? Board Member Baker?
No.
Board Member Linda? No? I'm a non-voting liaison here, so no. The procedure that we're going to follow tonight is that first we're going to hear from a staff overview. The applicant's going to have the opportunity to make a presentation with no time limit. Then staff's going to come back and give staff's report and recommendation also with no time limit. I've not been contacted by anybody wishing to claim a third-party intervener status. That's going to move us to public comment. Any members of the public have 3 minutes to speak to this agenda item. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to cross-examine. Staff can cross-examine members of the decision-making body, can ask questions of the applicant or of the staff. Then final arguments will be made by the applicant and staff. The city attorney will advise the decision-making body that applicable law and factual findings must be made to approve or deny the application. Then we'll deliberate, and after deliberations, the motion will be taken to approve, continue, deny, or approve with conditions. That's the order we'll follow, and we'll begin with the staff overview. Mr. Bryan, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm going to have to ask, Jenny, can you forward? It's not forwarded.
They're back there talking about. Right again?
They're talking about what?
There you go.
It's a rebellion thing.
Yeah.
Air's dumping trash back there.
And it's showing.
Okay, as stated, this is Resolution 2022-04, the special exception 2022-03, special exception request, which would allow for the development of a rural event center. As, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but as you all hopefully remember, the concept of the rural event center was actually proposed initially by the Planning and Zoning Board a few months back when the current applicant was looking for a rezoning to commercial neighborhood. And after discussion with the Planning and Zoning Board, decided that it would be better if we created a special exception allowance for the type of use that we're presented with, rather than the rezoning to commercial neighborhoods, which opened up a wide range of possible uses beyond that which was being requested at the time. Thank you. Just to refamiliarize you with the location, it's on the far eastern area of the city of Newberry on a 4.27 acre approximate parcel. There's a little bit better picture of it there. It's pretty much right across, almost right across the street from the Persimmons Nursery on the corner. Gives you a little bit better view parcel-wise. Parcel to the west is agricultural. Parcel to the west is actually an FDOT drainage basin. Parcel to the right is an undeveloped parcel. At the time this map was created, it was still under county, but now it's been rezoned to city of Newberry. But it is a commercial neighborhood parcel there. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Rumpf, who's going to give you the presentation that you had back, I think, November, just to refamiliarize you with the types of uses that this special event would allow for.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Rumpf, come on down. You gave us a great presentation before. So you can say the exact same thing over, or you can just give us a summary, whichever one you prefer.
Hello, Mr.
Welcome.
Mayor. Hello, members of the committee. And thank you for having me here. So my name is Shabnam Rumpf. My family and we came 2014 to U.S., to Gainesville. We haven't gone anywhere else because we love it here so much. And we really like the culture, especially in this area. Sorry, I haven't been speaking the whole day. I was in front of the computer. My voice is not coming out. Anyway. So I was very much inspired by, when I was doing my thesis, I've studied architecture many years ago. I was inspired by crystal formation, and I use that in urban planning. And I call this colorful programming because in my thesis I was working on organic growth. So just implementing very small programs, and then in time it would flourish and become something powerful and beautiful. So I was looking for a property that I can implement this idea for a long time. And finally I found this property. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, it's open. It's okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry. So when I found this piece of property, it was an agricultural, it had agricultural zoning, and I thought this, and especially during COVID time, we were all spending so much time outdoors, and I found that's actually really beautiful, is, like to be outdoors and with socializing, with distance socializing and all that. That would be like a perfect program that could work in this area. So we bought the property, and then I hired a landscape architect, Manley Design, one of the really good landscape architects in town. And I was thinking of a low impact built out, but more an eventful, say, garden design. And I really like the Jonesville culture and also the city of Newberry. So, just sort of mixing the two, we came up with this program that now you can move on to the next slide. So this was the initial drawing that I did. So the property has a road right now that goes into a couple of neighbors in the back. So that is a road that right now is in a really bad condition. So the road has to be fixed, but the rest would be an opportunity to be enclosed and to be created as a park situation. So this would be like 2/3 of the property. So the program would be basically kind of like an outdoor living room, bringing everybody into this place. So there would be different programs, eating, drinking, playing, a Zen garden, a small nursery, doing creative programming, and of course, the main, there should be a building as the central building to have some services, and probably the cafe then would be there. So this is how it started. And then you can go on, please. And then because this is in the green belt between Newberry and Jonesville, from outside you can see sort of like bamboo, kind of like a botanical garden feeling, and probably a signage. And then I was thinking bringing people outdoors, because we come from Europe, like, kind of like a beer garden situation. And then I was thinking, but if, taking the alcohol away, then, and including everyone, then the name of Deer Garden came. Then the signage would kind of resemble that kind of beer garden situation. And then from outside, you would see a really calm green zoning. And then for the eating, drinking part, then this beer garden can be housed beside the cafe or the tea house. It could have sort of some events, like music events. There could be market in that grass area, kind of like a Bo Diddley Plaza situation. Like local farmers can gather, they can sell their products. So there would be sort of seating where you see the terrace. There could be seating over there, or a picnic situation on the grass at the bottom. And then the outside, these are all possibilities. That could, maybe some food trucks would come, temporary or not. A little bit of lighting. Next, please. So when they gather, kind of like this situation. Next slide. And on the lawn area, there could be also like playing events, music events, and at the top you would see that the pink area, that can be, there is like a little farmhouse that could maybe house small animals, a petting zoo situation with maybe chickens and like goat, or something really cute. This is something I saw in London that I used to take my daughter to, and it was like a hit. Like the whole families in London were there, just bringing the kids, touching animals. And so this, for example, this area can be, there are a lot of veterinarian firms around. Maybe, there could be some kind of a collaboration with them. And they could bring some animals, introduce, adoption, something like that. And so it has a really flexible kind of usage for all areas. And then in time, it would prove itself how it could be successful. Next, please. So you see this nature trail. This is like 1/3 of a mile. So this also has the opportunity to bring people who want to do, like their morning walk, or bring friends and go through this path. For example, in that animal section, that like there could be birthday events for kids. Next, please. And at the back side, I was thinking to have these sort of like outdoor tent structures, and then there could be different sizes of these tents, and people can rent them, do different things. There could be like educational spaces, classrooms, or yoga, or like maybe a small one could be a little spa. So it has just, it's like a blank canvas for different kinds of things happening. So this would be like more on the quiet side of the park, and so there would be like meditation, maybe groups, or Tai Chi or something like that. So at the street side, there would be this rain garden, because actually at the moment it's kind of a wet area. So if everything works out, then I would hire a civil engineer to design for that kind, like flooding issues and drainage and all of that. So then this nursery is also a big component of this park. There would be like a greenhouse. One of the tents would be a greenhouse for the nursery. And I was thinking of just focusing on edibles and medicinal plants, like horticulture. Not ornamental so much, so that this would be kind of, because there are also a lot of nurseries around, so this would have its own theme. Like I do plant a lot of edibles at home, and it would be nice to know, okay, there's one place that I can go and buy everything that I need. So then this, the main building can house the retail for the nursery, the service area, which are the restrooms, bless you, and the cafe. So this all can happen in the central building. Next. The creative zone, again, like it's a blank canvas. There's art, music, activities, all different kinds of things can happen. And for the services, then recycling and disposal is going to be a big part. As you know, this area, we don't. There is no city sewer, so septic tank and well. We have to design for that. Access road, parking, storage. So all of this is going to be integrated into the planning. Next. So the building footprint is as small as possible, and these are these geodesic domes. And the farmhouse for the zoo area and the main building, and a little shed for the yoga area for storing, say, yoga mats, something like that, maybe a bathroom, maybe a check-in. I'm designing this at the moment, and I have it on the plan. And then the food trucks that can be there or not, depending on the event or the time and situation. Next, please. Yeah, and that was it.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we'll hear from staff's report along with their recommendation.
Okay, so, again, as you know, the impetus for this was the Planning and Zoning Board coming up with a concept, and so the special exception that allows for a small-scale event center basically covers the items and uses and a few more that were discussed by the applicant for her particular facility. So the requested uses for this would be yoga meditation center, the indoor and outdoor classrooms, nature trails, the petting zoo, et cetera, as outlined in her discussion. So the one thing that the Planning and Zoning Board needs to do is make a recommendation to the Commission. And some of the potential conditions that you might want to discuss placing on the special exception would be the hours of operation, review of compatibility maybe 2 years or 5 years down the road. As an example, the special exception we have for Gatorback, every 5 years they come in, or we review the special exception for compliance with the conditions of the special exception. Might want to do something like that here. Maybe parking considerations, those kind of things, but it's really up to the Planning and Zoning Board on what conditions that they would like to see placed on the special exception. And so with that, recommended action really is to discuss it, discuss any potential conditions, and then make a recommendation for either approval with conditions, or denial of resolution 2022-04.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the public here wish to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none. Ma'am, did you hear anything from staff that you'd like to cross-examine? Okay. And staff, did you hear anything from the applicant that you'd like to cross-examine? All right. Member decision-making body. Questions for the applicant or staff, especially when it comes to those conditions? Anybody want to jump in on the things you're thinking about? Member Baker.
I have nothing.
So, Mr. Mayor, my first question would be, you mentioned that other special exceptions get reviewed for compatibility. What kinds of things are you looking for when you do that check?
Mr. Chair, usually it's things like, well, it'll really be dependent and specific to the special exception that was granted and the conditions that were listed. But for instance, you look at compliance with the noise ordinances, or you look at compliance with, you look at things like how many complaints have or have not been made from people around the property, the special exception. You take in those kind of, have there been any impacts, external impacts, as a result of the special exception? And if so, then, are they significant enough to need to readdress, or are they minor in nature? Those kind of things. And so if you came up with a list of conditions that would be appropriate for a rural event center like this, then you might want, say, 2 years down the road or 5 years down the road, you might want to do a review and just make sure that they remained in compliance, or if there hadn't been any external impacts to the community or surrounding the special exception that were unanticipated at the time of approval.
And remind me what our, let's try this again. Remind me what our noise ordinance would be, since some of this had food truck or garden implications.
The noise ordinance in this case would follow whatever the sound requirements are or limitations are for agricultural zoning, because that's what it is. I believe during the day that's 75 decibels. In the evening, I think it reduces down to 55 decibels at the property line. And it would remain, that. Now, I will say there is the opportunity through condition to change those, because that's one of the natures of special exception, is each one is unique, and they're being granted the special exception to have a use that's not necessarily permitted by right. And so that allows the board to make recommendations and the commission to pass conditions that might not otherwise be in the land development regulations. So you could make it more strict, or you wouldn't necessarily be able to make it less strict, but you could impose a stricter set of guidelines under things like noise or light or those kind of things.
Does that conclude your questions, Member Baker? Other questions from the board? while you're thinking on it, Brian, why can't we make it less strict?
Mr. Mayor,
50 decibels at night, she's not gonna be able to have live music at 50 decibels in the evening. I mean,
certainly not
maybe
amplified.
acoustic, maybe.
Yeah, it really, conceivably, you could have amplified music, provided the amplification didn't exceed the noise ordinance. Same with acoustic, though. You could have acoustics that might violate the noise ordinance. It'd just be a matter of having to test for compliance. As far as why you can't make it less stringent is the LDRs establish the baseline. The conditions that you place on a special exception are over and above the baseline.
Dark sky, do we need to specify every time for these rural event centers, or is that now in our construction plans as a policy? Because I think, I'm fine with like trading out things and doing it slowly in town, but if we're gonna allow something to be out in the rural areas, we need to make sure that we are limiting the light pollution as much as possible. Is that already in there, or do we need to make that a special condition?
In this instance, it would probably, if that was a consideration that the board wanted to impose, you'd need to put it in the conditions, list of conditions. And you could address that either by, sort of one of two ways. The type of lighting would be one way to address it, and the hours of operation would be another. If you're, say, can only be open from certain hours, or a certain time at night, then you can't be generating, light that violates the dark sky standard after a certain time. And that way, beyond a certain hour, it could be compliant, and up to that time, you might allow for more flexibility.
Okay, I was a little bit confused by that, but I think my recommendation.
Certain types of lights would be allowable up to a certain time in the evening.
Up until like 9 o'clock, and then after 9.
Right, and then after that, then those types of non-compliant dark sky.
So if you had lights on a stage or something that were really hard to be dark sky compliant, you could have those up. I got you. Okay. That seems like a really hard thing to write into and then if you try to write that, then trying to enforce it, and say, well, that one doesn't have to be until, I don't know, I'd have to ponder on that one a little bit. Was there, Miss Linda, you had a question?
Well, I'm just, the dark lights, you know what my problem recently has been, but that's what we're discussing, is they have to point down and they can't shine out and be very bright. The noise, the decibels, I don't know decibels, I know some things about things, but I don't know decibels. But I do know that recently, church group had an event at Lois Fort Park, and I contacted someone because I thought that the Freddie Warmack Center had maybe was having a really good time. And so that's a long distance from Fort Park to my house, when I could tell you what songs were being played. But no, they're not. But I don't know decibels. That's my point here. And how we've had this problem for years, that if the music's too loud, it's too loud. If you can hear it 4 miles away, it's too loud. I don't care what your decibels are.
Usually, Mr. Chair, those type of events are more limited in nature in terms of they wouldn't be a recurring thing as a regular operating. It would be by special exception or a special temporary use permit for a larger.
Right, and I understand.
And they're
that,
granted a little
right.
bit special dispensation for that one event.
I guess that's my question about making it less stringent, because we specifically do make it less stringent for these special exceptions. Now, the difference here is that this is a repeating
Yes, sir.
special exception, but.
This would be an ongoing operation as opposed to a one-time.
Right, but we do this for
one-time,
fireworks, we do this for West Fest, we say, okay, this one night up until 9:30, we're going to break the noise ordinance. Now, I'm not recommending it because I think the people around there would be, offended by noise every Friday and Saturday night. But I also, 50 decibels, and this has been a while since I've sat through these presentations, I want to say that's the sound of a tractor running. So if you can think of a tractor in the distance out there in the field, that's about the 50 decibel limit.
It's not very loud.
So if you're talking about live music for an audience, that's going to be tough to pull off and not break the noise ordinance. Now, there's all kinds of sounds people that can point it in certain directions, and they can mitigate, and they can do all kinds of different things. But that and that piece of property sort of goes down and then comes back up. So you'll be pushing the noise this way. But the people around are going to hear the noise.
Do we need to, I'm sorry, do we need, Brian, I don't want to get into a long involved discussion here about sound, but I think that we normally cut things off at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever. Whoever's doing sound, it has to stop at a certain time, which is a reasonable time. Do we need, in this particular situation, in this issue that we're discussing, do we need a time? Like that the music has to be gone at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock? I don't care what time.
I would suggest we ask the applicant.
Do we need to add that now?
Yeah, I was, to the mayor/chair's point, I would say we could certainly ask that of the applicant what the intention is at this point, to what they need or would like to be able to do, and then we can discuss it from there.
Would you mind coming back and talking to us, Ms. Rumpf, about what's your plans when it comes to live music, any events that are going to be, noisy? Is that a central part of your business model where every Friday and Saturday night you need this? Is this a once a quarter kind of event? Talk to us a little bit.
Yeah, well, I don't imagine this is happening like every week. And I do not imagine that it's going to be longer than 9:30. It just makes sense that, like after that, everything would just slow down and people go home. This is my imagination. And for the decibels, I imagine that this is definitely doable. It just has to be designed, like engineered design, sound engineering.
Question. So, your event, Space, pretty much has a go with the flow kind of theme, because you really don't have any set standards or time for what kind of classes or time frame. So you don't have a time in mind that you want to stick to. Just people come and they use the facility till they are done with whatever they're done with.
Yes. So I have not really run a business on each items, but I do. I think that it has to be sort of in harmony. And then there would be these slots that you can basically, I'm imagining that, say, I'll be the landlord, just put it that way, and then I would rent these spaces to people to do different events. And then it would be in a time slot that they can take, they can use the facility, and then so that, the place would be secure. You can secure the whole building before some intruder comes and something else happens. So it has to be managed as a whole. That's what I mean.
Member Long still has the floor.
So you're pretty much renting out the whole facility for someone else to run these different type of events, basically.
Yes, to professionals or to people who know what they're doing.
Well, I just looked up One Love Cafe that's over off of 39th Avenue, which is a very laid-back, lovely place. And I go over there periodically with friends, but they close at 9 o'clock at night. I didn't have any idea because we get there early and we leave early. We're very old, so we don't stay late.
Right.
But it looks like they open at 11 and close at 9. So That's kind of something that you're talking
Yeah.
about, too. It would be an early evening kind of dinner
Yes.
and enjoy
Yes.
your friends and go home.
Yeah. I don't imagine this is gonna take as long as midnight.
I mean, I don't want to, you're embarking on a business, and I don't want to tie your hands in such a way that prevents you from being successful while balancing the neighbors around. So, I mean, I think 9 o'clock is probably when you would maybe end up as a closing time, but I can also see on a Friday or Saturday night wanting to be there till 10,
Right.
10:30, 11. So, I want to, if there's a way to try to figure out how to balance this where we're not writing it so stringently that you're back here 6 months after opening saying, I'm having to kick people out at 9 o'clock and I've still got 100 customers who, would be there for at least another hour, Did you sub on that topic?
Well, yes, but I think that the band quits playing at 9 because you can, nobody says at 9 o'clock, everybody go home. You still have food, you still have a beer, you got whatever you're drinking, and people are sitting around talking, kids are playing. But I'm thinking this means that it's around 9 o'clock, the music stops.
Right.
Basically.
That's what I think too. That, yeah.
Mr. Chair, so given that a special exception can be reviewed, one of the ways we could approach this is by allowing the applicant to have the special exception to start her business the way she wants to, and after a year and a half, 2 years, check and see how it's run, what the concerns may be at that time, to see if some of this just falls into place organically, or if there are issues that come up along the way.
I would tend to agree with that, Mr. Long, is your finger on the button there? Or no? Okay, just checking. I think that's a good way to go. Brian, I have one more question on this topic. Okay, so it's a special exception that's enduring. Is it possible to give the special exception and grant 3 times a year at the applicant's discretion where the night gets to go to in-town decibel levels? I'm thinking New Year's Eve, those kinds of things where she gets to pick, the applicant gets to pick, but that way we can say to the residents around, we're not giving carte blanche to every Friday, Saturday, but 3 times a year for big events, we're going to go ahead and write that in.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's certainly within the board's prerogative to recommend a condition that would limit larger scale or longer concert events to a limited number throughout the year. Again, example of the special exception for Gatorback, they're limited to 6 events per year. And so outside of that, the events that they have are much smaller scale. Those are 6 larger scale events or types of events. So that's certainly within the prerogative of the board.
And if we go with Member Baker's suggestion, are you seeing this is granted the first year on a 12-month basis, we come back in, and then after that, it could be a 3 or 5 year. We don't want to make you come in, feel like you're always here, but I feel like that organic needs to be a shorter period of review time.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's my intent, that we could review it after it has a chance to develop and see what the issues are, and then grant the exception for a longer period of time.
And I think that would give you the option to know better, I agree to this, but it's really not working. Would you guys consider, and then present something else?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about noise and we've talked about light. Let's talk about the traffic a little bit. Whoever's controlling the clicker, can you go back to the original picture, the one that had the road that you're coming in on? Keep on. It was all the way back at the very beginning of her presentation. It was a very nice little sketch. And I want to ask, because you said it's the road that's there now, And is that road going to still be a road for the neighbors? Or is it, you're saying that road is going to be shut down, the neighbors won't be able to access
I
that?
have a good picture of the, hold on a second.
It will have to, Mr. Chair, it will have to remain an access road for the neighbors.
I don't know if you see.
And is the applicant aware that it's going to have to remain an access road for the neighbors?
Yes.
So they'll be able to come in and out?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I have talked to them, yes. Okay, so this is Newberry. You see it? This is Newberry Road. This already exists, not in this shape, it's like really straight.
Can you come speak into the mic? I know you want to hold it or see it, but we need it for the record.
Yeah, sure.
And we have a smaller,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar. If there's something else, I just want to make sure, because it sounded like in your presentation that you may be closing the road down for parking and.
Oh, okay, so this part, which is 1 acre of land, I am not doing anything here. And this is reserved for overflow parking. So this would give an opportunity for cars to go back on the road. And there's going to be, so all of this yellow area, these are parking. And around this area.
Okay. And we haven't had an application for the Robinson family reunion in a while, but is the applicant aware of that event that happens? It used to happen every year.
The Easter event.
Yeah.
So an Easter event tends to have a lot of traffic on that location. Are you familiar with that?
I have been told about it. I haven't seen it.
So that might be something you want to think about consider, because there's a lot of traffic and I'm not sure how that would affect based on where the food truck located. You might want to check into seeing that, because I don't know.
It might be an opportunity for y'all to partner, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if they're doing it
Right.
this year or not, but I know in past years they have. So.
When they hold that event, traffic tends to spill out onto Newberry Road from parking and those kinds of things. Now, we worked with them a lot to mitigate different entrance points to try to make sure that it doesn't back up on the road and all those kinds of things. But I just wanted to make sure, because I know that road was a point of contention with the previous owner of that property. So I just want to make sure you're fully aware of the road, the access points, that event that goes on. I don't see why y'all couldn't. You know, that might be one of the nights where you stay open a little bit later and works out to everybody's benefit, you know. Just want to make sure all those conversations are in front of you.
Right.
Just to confirm, Mr. Chair, we haven't had an application for a special temporary use for that event this year, and I think it's been 5 years now since they've held the event, so.
Okay. Okay. I mean, those are generally the big three: traffic, parking, lights, noise, sound. Yeah.
And we left hours up to the end of the year, trying to figure out.
I think that's a good suggestion. You know, I think she knows the parameters of the sound. If we're getting nothing but complaints, then, you know, we say, look, when you come back, this isn't going to work out. Maybe then she can organically say, okay, I'll shut the music off at 9. Maybe there aren't any complaints. Member Baker?
Mr. Chair, I have one other question, just from a procedural standpoint. Once we grant the special exception, plans and everything still have to go through, and the planning department, it would still have to go through DOT review for the roads and the traffic, correct?
Mr. Mayor, the plans for the road improvements and any structures being constructed would be, you wouldn't typically have a site plan approval process for gardens and things like that, but you would be for where the location of the structures and things would come.
Okay.
My last point here is, I'm very excited. I think this is just going to be a real plus in the neighborhood, or for Newberry. I love your design and plans. I can't wait.
She's tired of driving over there, that long.
Yeah, one love. It's a long way.
Long way to go.
It's a lot shorter
Yeah.
drive, yes.
But
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't, have you been to One Love?
I have not. People keep telling me about it.
Well,
I've
we're
never been.
going. I'll get
Okay.
you and we will go.
That's a nice question.
All right, adjourn.
Yes.
Wait a minute, we got.
I love the fact that we can sit under the cover if we want to, listen to the music if it happens. We usually try to pick which band is going to be there. But out in the field, out around us, there are kids playing everywhere. There's cornhole games going on. There's just, it's a German thing.
Yes.
It really is, and it's very nice. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, we all are.
Member Long?
I see the beer garden, is that something you approve yourself or someone else is coming to do?
Actually, my husband is thinking about creating something in future, but I guess for starters, we probably would talk to Swamphead or some of the brewers in town and see who's interested in taking it over. Mhm.
And I have one question for staff. Ms. Rumpf, we appreciate you. Brian, just so we're all clear, under this brand-new rural event center ordinance, this applicant is granted the exception. If this applicant sells Deer Garden to somebody, the exception, as long as Deer Garden's business model is virtually the same, the special exception goes with the business, or the special exception is just with the applicant?
Mr. Chair, that actually is at the discretion of the board and the commission. You can write it pretty much any way you want. It can go specific to the initial applicant, and once that applicant is no longer the owner, it changes, or it's relinquished. It can go with, like you just described, where as long as the uses are substantially the same, it can go to the next, or it can go with the land. It depends on how the board and the commission want that condition established.
Scott, is there any one of those options that's any more or less enforceable? I mean, if it's perfectly enforceable to say, as long as your business model isn't changing, you get the special exception, I think that's a reasonable request. But if we can't ever enforce that, then I would say, no, it stays with the applicant.
I think that would be the safest and most conservative methodology. It stays with the applicant, and then when the business model changes or the business is purchased or transferred, that sort of thing, then the new entity can come in and tell you how they're going to do it, what they're going to do, and if they're going to continue exactly the same type of model that has previously been engaged in. So that's the most conservative way of doing it.
Okay, I would maybe suggest, since we're setting up a system here where the applicant's going to be here in a year, maybe we make a note, staff, if you make a note, and we say at this point in time that it goes with the applicant. If everything's going well, maybe we revisit that point, and the extended could go with the business if we're more comfortable with that. But that would give us a little bit of leeway. Or if you guys just want to write it with the business now, or there was a third in there too that I'm forgetting.
Mr. Chair, you could write it so that it has to be reviewed by the commission at the point of sale. So rather than necessarily having the next owner start from scratch, it would give them the opportunity to come in, convince the commission that they're essentially going to just take the business as it is and continue it, and then give the commission the ability to sign off on that, or you could write it to where the next owner would basically start from scratch and get the new special exception approved.
I like the process of access, so you get it out the way, so they know that you're going to report it back.
And I think this is an important point that maybe staff needs to continue to prompt, because at some point we won't be here, there'll be somebody else here. But if we don't set this in stone, then they get the rural event center, this business model goes out, they do something else that's in that frame. But I think the idea of the rural event center is that we get a chance to see the model that's being pitched and vote on that. We like that idea. So we've had deliberations. Any more deliberations? And are any more questions? kind of merged questions and deliberations. Ms. Rumpf, would you like to make a final argument? Don't have to, but you're welcome to. Staff, would you like to make a final argument? Don't have to, but you're welcome to. Ms. Attorney, would you please advise decision-making by applicable law?
Substantial and competent evidence.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll have deliberations. If there are no more deliberations, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Sierra, are you writing down all these conditions we've been talking about? You'll watch them on the video. Put it right on the spot. Yeah, that's what gets you talking trash about me back there. Approve with conditions, continue or deny. Do we have more deliberations, any more conversations? Continue it or deny it. So you can approve with the conditions, dark sky, 1 year, 1 year renewal. Everything that we've talked about, staff will go back and watch the video. Approve with all conditions that we've discussed.
I approve all conditions that we discussed.
Okay,
I have a question first.
okay.
Which-
Hold that motion.
Which exception are we going with? That it stays with the applicant unless the business model changes?
I thought it was point of sale.
Point of sale?
Yeah. So the next person that buys it knows exactly what model they're in.
So
The commission would actually go with statement.
Okay.
right,
I wanted it clarified because if I didn't know.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Member Long suggested that, no one else objected, so I assumed that was the stance. So I have a motion on the floor with all the conditions that we have discussed here.
Second.
I have a second from Member Baker. Any other questions from the board? Any other questions on the motion from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That takes us out of quasi-judicial. For the item 3 on tonight's agenda, we'll go back into legislative. Mr. Walker, would you please read ordinance 2022-19/LDR 22-02 into the record for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City of Newberry amending the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations as amended by amending Section 2.1 definitions general and Section 4.2.20 signs to provide a changeable copy, electronic message signs at city-owned facilities, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is passed. Ordinance number 2022-19 as read by title only.
Ms. Winnie, round 2.
Ditto. That it? All right. So this is an item that your Historic Architectural Review Board just heard and recommended to the City Commission that they approve this. This is for a proposed amendment to your code to be able to have electronic message signage for the City Hall. This is located in your historic district, and it requires some changes to your land development regulations to make that possible. And the purpose is really about public service, about providing improved communication with the public, with your residents, to be able to provide announcements, upcoming events, public safety, emergency announcements. Signs are already allowed on public property as erected by the public entity, which would be your local city government in this case, to identify the public property and also to convey public information. So this is consistent with that and does support the public purpose, promoting the health, safety, welfare of the community. And it is consistent with the practice of local governments dealing with their regulations for municipal-owned properties. The recommended language is shown in your draft ordinance. You do have some change to the table for signs permitted. Specifically in this, we would be recommending that you adopt the language for municipal-owned city hall facility to have the freestanding sign. It would comply with your code that's already written and with a few minor provisions here. Note that the section under design standards in the table as proposed should read 4.2.20.4F and not the first number is supposed to be a 4 and not a 2. And that deals with the height of the height of signs in the historic district. You also have a recommended provision to make all that consistent in your signs within historic districts to provide for signs erected or displayed in your historic district unless specified otherwise in these regulations, which accounts for what the other change we're making. and you still have to comply with your sign code and with the provisions in your land development regulations. Again, one other place that would need to add that provision that is except as provided elsewhere in these regulations, and that would be in your architectural site and design standards dealing with your signage under Section D. So the recommendation of staff is pretty much just to consider the ordinance and to make a recommendation to the City Commission as to whether you would recommend that they adopt this ordinance as proposed or with any other changes, or to not adopt it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Thank you, Ms. Wendy. Has anybody had buyer's regret since the HARB vote? Thought of any new questions? Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
would this be more like the Oakview and Newberry Elementary and Newberry High School signs, or like the Medcare sign?
We're looking at signs that have to
Even
match
nicer.
your building, and that means the monolithic monument type sign, and it would be fantastic looking sign that's going to match your buildings, your historic buildings, and much better than the other.
If I may, in addition to the architectural design that you would match whatever the building it's in front of, also too, the type of sign, the type of the electronic sign would be more akin to the Agriculture and Equestrian Center.
Right.
Not the bright bulbs that strung together make a letter and then words with a black background, but it would be more like the television screen with the white background and the black lettering that you can program at varying brightnesses and that kind of thing, so it's less obtrusive.
Exactly, and as we discussed in the Historic Architecture Review Board meeting, that we have some great pictures of some examples. We'll tell you all, we'll send them to you.
The only thought that I've had since the HARB meeting was, we used to have a TV channel, 97. Does that still exist? Do we still do that?
I don't think we
But we
did.
had a whole series of policies about what could be there and what couldn't be there. I think that might be the base of something to dust off, because as soon as we put that sign, we're going to be hit with a lot of requests for advertising. So we might want to just include that as a recommendation. Let's start thinking about, how do we go about deciding when someone calls up and says, hey, someone's turned 100 years old, we want to wish them happy birthday. Do we go down that road? We'll be wishing people happy birthday every day. Maybe only if you hit 100, right?
I think you have to remember that the purpose for
Civic
this
duty,
is
right?
about, yes, it's
But
about.
if you make it 100, that's 100 years of paying taxes.
Okay.
That's worth a happy birthday.
Public purpose, yes.
Mr. Mayor, if you pass a proclamation or if you make a proclamation about the 100-year-old, then it becomes an official action.
All right, just a thought. Ready for a motion? It's on the screen. Anybody want to make a motion to pass ordinance or recommend passing ordinance 2022-19/LDR 22-02?
I make a motion that we pass the ordinance 2022-19 LDR 22-02 and make a recommendation to the City Commission.
I have a motion from Ms. Linda.
Second.
Second from Ms. Baker. Any comments, questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Does the public have any comments, questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I'm going to assume that agenda item 4, we want to table till we have a full board here in the same manner we did. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to table this to our next meeting.
I have a motion from Member Baker,
I second that motion.
second from Member Long. Any comments, questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? Public comments, questions on the motion on the floor?
This is my
You count
last.
as the public, it's perfectly fine.
This is my last Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and I wanted to just tell
Wait,
you that
say
I
that
have.
again?
This is my last Planning and Zoning Board meeting. I'm retiring as of March 3rd, my last day. And I wanted to just tell you how much I have enjoyed working with you and what an honor it has been to be a part of the City of Newberry's team. And it's just wanted to just let you know that and how much I appreciate each one of you and all that you give and do. And it doesn't go unnoticed. It's very important to everyone. So just wanted to thank you. Yes, I am.
Well, you're making everybody up here choke up
Yes.
now at the end of the meeting, you know? It's been 11 years that you've been the one explaining all of these numbers to me. So we appreciate you and all of your years of service. And I'm assuming we're going to have a retirement party. If I'd have known, I'd brought a cupcake or something in right now, you know? I feel like this is very anticlimactic, you know?
Well, I've been here since 2007, so it's been, I've seen a lot of change just in that short period of time, which seems long to some of us and some of us short, but there's a lot of great things happening, and I will be watching from a different aspect there when I come to visit with friends and do things over here, so it'll be.
You'll swing in and just watch a meeting just for the fun.
No, I will not. Nice try, but no. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your years of service. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
So that's you saying you're not coming to July 5th then? Yeah.
Enjoy retirement.
Yes. Well, there are no more public comments, then motion to table? Not yet. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Topics for members for discussion. Member Long? Member Baker?
Congratulations on your retirement. We're all very jealous now.
Absolutely. Miss Linda?
Nothing.